And get the June 1st, 2022 TTAC meeting called to order. I'd like to welcome everybody that's here and online. Go to James for roll call.
I'll read off everyone's name of the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee. Please let us know if you're here. Ty Adley.
Here, 4101.
David Armstrong.
Here.
Kara Boyles. Ryan Preston. Here. Josh Corwin.
Here.
Mike Daigle. Chris Tresser.
Here.
Ryan Fellows.
Here.
Amy Hill is not here, although she loaned us this space for today, so we thank Transpo for that, but unfortunately she is out of town. Bill Holder.
Here.
Chris Jamrose. Natasha Kaufman. Marsha McSherry. Sky Meadows.
Here.
Jessica Miller. Steve Moriarty. Charles McKenzie.
Here. Here.
Jason Peters. Derek Spear.
Here.
Sean Cerisi.
Here.
Justin Taylor. And Brent Warren.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum of the members present in person. We don't have enough people in person to allow for virtual voting today, but we do have enough people in person to conduct business. So everyone who's online, you can feel free to participate in the conversation. We would just ask that you're not first, second, or to vote. That makes sense.
You shall have a copy of the minutes from the May 4th meeting. I'd ask for any questions or comments. And if there are none, looking for a motion. Second, the whole. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the May 4th meeting, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And we can move on to reports. Secretary.
Yeah, in the packet, you should have received the May modifications, both in the virtual packet and then back in front of you. Those are all the modifications that we've done since the last meeting. Modifications are things that the TTAC and the policy board have given staff the authority to change in the tip between meetings, as they're usually not large substantive natures. You can find this online as well for the general public. As presented just as informational items only. There's no need for approval on the main modifications.
Thank you, James. Moving into old business, we have no old business. Any new business, James?
We do have new business. We will have Allison present our transit resolution.
Good morning, everyone. Dustin online, can you confirm that you can hear me from the podium?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So we just have one amendment to our transportation improvement program, and it falls under Transit Resolution 17-22. This is a Transpo sponsored project. We'll be doing some renovation work, specifically with security cameras, heating and air conditioning units, etc. In our 22 to 26 TEP, we'll be increasing funding for rehab and renovating facilities line item by $248,373. And this project was not added to our 20 to 24 TEP for some reason, so we're going to be adding the total line item of $510,466, and that's to the 20 to 24 TEP. Happy to take any questions on this resolution. If there are none, I would ask for your endorsement of Transit Resolution 17-22.
Move to endorse Second.
We have a motion and a second on resolution 1722. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? If not, resolution is passed.
Just an item of note, we mentioned last month that the state is working on its state transportation improvement program. It's supposed to be completed this time a year ago. It ran into some challenges that the state is working through its corrections. That's why today's overall amendments are very light, because we're in this weird space, this kind of gray space right now, where the state has a draft plan. That draft plan includes all of our projects to March, when they kind of paused everything. So then everything since March, we may have to reprocess or do a little bit differently. So we're kind of trying to save it to just all the must-dos right now. And that's why today's agenda for TIP amendments is a little light. We're hoping that Federal Highway and FTA will approve this STIP with some comments and corrections kind of by mid-June. And if that happens, then we should see in July and August probably some more amendments and everything being processed. There is a pretty big challenge with the STIP right now in process and procedure. And so that's going to have to get cleaned up, because Federal Highway and FTA are going to release that statewide transportation improvement program with corrective actions, things that have to get fixed. And so there may be some new processes and things that emerge from that. One of the things that we're trying to talk through with the state right now is that we'll probably have amendments processed in July and August, maybe September. And then there's going to be another period where we can close things down for amendments. So if you're looking at projects that you have in the TIP and you're thinking through whether you're the state, whether you're a local entity, if things need to get moved around, really the time to think through that is July, August, September, because there's probably going to be another brief pause while the state tries to improve some processes. What we're trying to convince them of is that a lot of the errors occur because there are two separate documents where these projects have to get listed twice, right? There's the TIP, which MACOG maintains in our area, and then there's the statewide plan, which is maintained by NDOT. They have the ability under federal statute to basically say, like, hey, all the projects that are in MACOG's area, we're not going to put in the statewide plan directly. We're going to reference you to MACOG's TIP. This is done in Michigan, lots of other states too. It's something that we're advocating for because right now, so many of the challenges that keep occurring is the comment back is the TIP and the STIP are inconsistent. This happens 85% of the time. And we're saying, well, they can't be inconsistent if they are the same thing. So we're trying to talk through that with them. We'll see what that looks like, but throughout this summer, you might hear about some new processes or procedures. And then in addition to that, the state is still looking to potentially move forward with a new STIP later this year, right? Because this should have been, we do it every 2 years. And the year-long delay of the old STIP means that they're now butting up against the timeline for a new STIP. So just FYI, over the next few months, you might hear more about this. Some procedures and processes might change here, but we want to make you aware of that. So, sorry for the long-winded explanation.
Thank you, James, for that information. With that, we'll move on to staff updates.
Good morning. This is, excuse me, this is Leah. Can you hear me all right in the room?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. As some of you are aware, we had a $600,000 brownfields grant that we received several years ago. And we're excited to share that we have received an additional $500,000 that we will have available to us starting in October. We have a priority site in South Bend and in Elkhart, but beyond that, this funding is not programmed, and so we welcome new sites be submitted to MACOG. If you go to macog.com/brownfields.html, you can find our sites of interest form, and we welcome you to submit sites that maybe there's interest in development, but there's some uncertainty about the past uses and potential for contamination. We can help resolve that so that that's not a barrier to reuse moving forward. So with that, I'll let James handle any questions that are in the room. Anything I missed?
Just want to comment, on behalf of South Bend, just to express our appreciation to MACOG and Leah for the work to see the grant. We're happy to work with the property, the 1500 block of West Washington. We're actually doing a neighborhood planning process for that area now, so the timing couldn't be better for that kind of activity. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Leah. This year with the Brownfields program, we kind of rode some ups and downs going into this call, where EPA had said they were going to restructure some programs that were going to be really beneficial for regions, basically large grants for regional entities, because they saw that was something where they've seen some of the best return on investment. And then right before the call, they changed their mind and they said, no, we're actually going to award it to states. We're not going to award to regions. We're going to award to states. And so kind of the coalition program that we had previously applied for the 600,000, it temporarily had gone away for this call. And so, Leah was able to get creative and pursue the community-wide assessment side of things, and worked extremely hard. And thanks to everyone who has supported the Brownfields program over the last 3 years, and providing it with quality sites to move forward. And thanks to Leah. So we'll be moving forward then in the next few months with procurement to hire a vendor for this kind of cycle for these funds. So that'll be really the next few months as we look to get everything in place for kind of the fall/winter of this year. So
Yeah, and I have a comment to clarify on the coalition bit. We still plan to consider ourselves a regional coalition. So we'll still come around and have each of the county commissioners sign a memorandum stating such. It just won't be under the official EPA program or definition, but that should give us more flexibility in how we can actually use our funds, which could be a benefit. But we do need that membership of each county so that we have the ability to spend funding anywhere incorporated or unincorporated within our region.
Great point.
All right, this is also me. An exciting opportunity. EPA has just opened a clean school bus program, which can be used. It can be used typically for propane or electric. CNG is also eligible, but that's not a common use for school buses. What is exciting is that 5 of our local school districts have been chosen to receive the maximum available amount, which is $375,000 per bus, which is very attractive. And then all other school districts in the state are in our region are eligible to receive $250,000 per bus, as well as $13,000 for charging infrastructure and $20,000 for the prioritized schools. Those 5 schools are mainly rural. We did not have any schools, unfortunately, that were eligible under high need or poverty. But the 5 rural school districts are Tippecanoe Valley, Union North, Culver, Argus, and Triton. And they've all been notified as well. So that funding can also be combined with an additional source, which is Indiana Michigan Power. They currently are funding electric buses and they do not need to be in Indiana, Michigan Power territory. So just to make you aware, any school districts in our region are eligible for that lower $250,000 amount, but then could also apply to get more funding through that Indiana, Michigan Power program, even if you're in NIPSCO electric territory or an REMC, et cetera. So there are other opportunities to stack more funding on top of the EPA amount. That rebate application is fairly simple as far as grants go. It will close on August 19th and then will be decided as a lottery system beyond that. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to share more information from the EPA.
Leah, for that, is there a quantity that local school districts can apply for the EPA program? You know, is it like one per school, or can you ask for additional?
No, it's not that restrictive. I am not remembering the exact number at the moment. I can pull that up and get back to you by the end of the meeting, but it might even be 20, like the number 20 is coming to mind, but it's more than just a single pilot, which you saw. It's a good point. You saw in the Volkswagen program through IDEM. They gave one school 3 buses, and then they just started giving every school 1 bus. This is a very large funding source. So there will be more opportunity to apply for multiple buses, but schools might want to moderate their initiative. This program will continue to be around, might want to apply for a few buses at most, I would think, to pilot the technology, the charging, and just make sure they understand how it would work in their operations at first. That would be my recommendation, to pilot it.
Thanks, Leah.
Okay, continuing on with the grants and funding updates. My first update is that the second round of NDOT's Community Crossings Matching Grant for calendar year 22 will open July 1st and close July 29th. For anyone not familiar with this program, funding is available for road and bridge preservation work, as well as pre-existing sidewalk and curb work associated with those roads or bridges. Funding is capped at $1 million between the 2 rounds. So if you were awarded funding during the first round, make sure that your request does not exceed that $1 million. And I will note that all projects older than 18 months must be closed out to be eligible to apply. And the deadline to close out those projects is June 30th. And that 18 months is from when contractor's contract was executed. David, did I miss anything with that?
No, just it's the 2020-2 call and prior have to be closed out by June 1st, and that includes any payback.
So the second half of 2020.
The 2020-2 call, the second call in 2020, right, and everything prior must be closed. I think we've got a couple 2019 still open. And
do we have any questions about that, or want to talk through projects or how to apply? Please feel free to reach out. And then my next update, as I mentioned at our last meeting, MACOG will be having a call for projects for fiscal year 23 through 29. This application opened up last Monday, and it will close June 29th. Everyone should have received an email with links to the applications, as well as to our program overview and project selection document, which outlines funding types and eligible programs. But if you did not receive this link for any reason, these documents can also be found on our website. If you go to our programs tab, to transportation, and then to our tip page, all of the links will be found midway down the page. But just a reminder, eligible applicants are local governments, regional transportation authorities, or transit agencies. Funding is available for new projects as well as existing projects. And I have been getting some questions about the funding availability. So I've thrown the chart here on the slide. This can also be found in page 6 of the project selection document. But essentially this chart outlines the $16 million that were allocated every year, taken out the projects that we so fiscal year 29, we don't have any projects programmed. If we're applying for additional funding for existing projects, I would suggest looking at this chart and seeing if that request fits with our availability. And then in terms of new projects, in our application, we ask for fiscal year, our staff will work on finding where new projects fit best within our availability and go from there. I will note we do have one new funding program this year, thanks to the new bipartisan infrastructure law, is the Carbon Reduction Fund. And this is a small pot of money, sorry. But one thing it specifically will fund is EV charging infrastructure. So Leah and I have been having conversations about what that will look like for our region, but there's definitely money available for that, as well as kind of existing projects that we traditionally fund. So happy to answer any questions, or if you want to set up a meeting with myself and Caitlin to talk through projects, happy to do that as well. Any questions?
What I would say related to the funding availability is that Ellie and Caitlin have tried to estimate what's available in each year, right? After you look at what we've already programmed, these are estimates. So if your project you think needs $2.3 million in additional funds and they only showed $2 million, just ask for what you need and we'll be able to tell you if it can fit, okay? So use these as a guide, but not as a firm rule, right? We're trying to give you an idea of like, okay, don't ask for a $7 million project in 23, because that's just not plausible. But, you know, if you're looking for a big project, the later out we go in our programming, the easier it'll be to program, okay? So use these as a guide, not necessarily as a firm rule. And then from there, you know, if you are, as Ali mentioned, if you have existing projects, please let us know if you're thinking through the need for additional funds on different phases. If you think that you might need more right-of-way funding or more construction funding, it's a great time to let us know. You'll know, many of you at least, that we typically do this much later in the calendar year. Typically, we do this more towards fall. Well, we are getting more money because of the infrastructure bill, right? So because of that, we're going from about $12 million a year to about $16 million a year, right? And so we're having to adjust to that on the fly, because when they gave us those funds, that started in 22. So the infrastructure bill covers 22 to 26. Well, we were in 22 already when they passed that bill, right? So we already had things programmed and built out and ready to go, and had to adjust to basically spend through an extra $2 to $3 million last year, because each year kind of stair steps up. So we're having this call earlier, and it's on a quicker time frame, because we do have money in 23 that we might need to work through obligated. And so what we want to make sure is that if we're selecting new projects, that we might be able to get your preliminary engineering obligated this year, as in fiscal 23. I know we're still technically in 22, but like July 1 starts 23. And so what we're hoping is that if you're giving us projects, and especially if they're new projects and we decide to fund them, is that we might be able to fund their preliminary engineerings now, which means that if your project's selected, we are going to need you to issue an RFP like now, right? And then to follow that through so that we can get those projects obligated in a very timely manner. We had a lot of help from all of you advancing preliminary engineerings last year to get those new fundings obligated, but it definitely was hopes and prayers in February and March of getting some things through that we'd like to try and accelerate that this year. So that's why we're doing this sooner. I know summer isn't always the best time, right? I'm sure there's a better time, but we're asking to do this now for the sake of time to try and make sure that we can best set up the program for this fiscal year and set us up for upcoming fiscal years with the infrastructure funding that we are receiving. So, please understand that that's why we're doing it. And as Ali already pointed out, the carbon reduction program, there's still a lot of unknowns about it. It's a brand new program. We have some guidance. There's a deep amount of questions, right? Like if we're doing electric vehicle charging, does that fall under a programmatic agreement or am I environmental? Because most likely I'm installing an EV charging station in the parking lot, right? It's previously disturbed, all these other things, right? So theoretically it should be programmatic, but is it covered in the programmatics? It may or may not be. And if it isn't, then it's going to take some time to get in there. Theoretically, one of those projects, if it's a municipal parking lot, something like that, right? That could be developed in an 8 to 12 months time frame, where it could be from PE to construction. But if it's not programmatic, then it might be a 16-month time frame, right? So there are still a lot of questions about that. But if you have an interest in expanding the electric vehicle network, kind of started with Volkswagen and locals have started with their local funding. If you're looking at that as a potential project, please consider that. It is a small pot of money, but we have the ability to kind of make that into a larger pot of money. So if you have interest in that, please consider that as we're still trying to figure out exactly what that program is going to look like.
Yeah, and just going back to the funding availability, not included in this chart, we have coronavirus relief funding that needs to be spent by fiscal year 2025. So like James said, if you have a $2.3 million project, but we only show $2 million available, do still apply for that, and we'll try to make it work the best we can. And just also another type of project that we're considering funding that we might not necessarily in the past is feasibility studies. We're not going to fund 10 feasibility studies, but if we're able to fund 1 or 2 that we can make that within our availability, we're open to that. MACOG right now is currently funding a few feasibility studies, one with Brett and Charlie, and Nathanie, the kind of 2 and 101. So we see it as a good way to do a deeper dive into a project that thinking about applying, but don't necessarily know the feasibility of it, and it's definitely a good way to accelerate preliminary engineering in the long run. So that is an option as well. And then my final update, our next quarterly tracking meeting will be held on June 29th. So this meeting normally falls on the first week of July, but with July 4th, lots of people probably traveling, I've decided to move it up 1 week, but you'll be receiving the first reminder email from Carla about this meeting. And I will note, since we had several lettings the last couple of months, if your project has successfully let and construction funds have been obligated, we no longer require you to submit quarterly tracking form. On the flip side, if your project's just starting out and you just brought a consultant on for preliminary engineering, but they haven't started doing any work, we won't require a form for that either. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Good morning. I wanted to mention our regional freight mobility plan steering committee meeting. Originally, we had this scheduled a little earlier, but due to some staffing changes with our consultant, we had to push it out to June 14th. So this meeting will largely go over kind of the needs that we've been gathering through the process the last half of the year. So taking into consideration stakeholder interviews, meetings, as well as some previous plans. We'll be presenting kind of a summary of those needs that have been collected, as well as kind of seek input to make sure that we haven't forgotten any of the needs. And so this meeting will be held on June 14th at Cape Joseph County Library, the main branch. There will be a virtual option if you're unable to attend in person. So if you haven't already, please RSVP to me. And if you'd like to attend virtually, we can send you a meeting.
This is Leah again. Just a heads up. Oh, sorry. Other questions?
You're good, Leah.
No, I think you're okay.
Okay, just a heads up that NDOT is hosting a meeting in person in Plymouth tomorrow for the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan and how they are going to implement their formula funds from that federal program. They have to put together a plan by August. There's also a survey that is still open on NDOT website. If you Google NDOT NEVI, that website should pop up. That survey is open until June 8th. So just wanted to make you aware. Sorry.
Yeah.
Want to make you all aware of that.
Oh, what was the question? All right. So yeah, I was just going to say on the sort of NEVI, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, that's a new funding program out of the infrastructure bill. So the infrastructure bill created, MAP 21 and FAST Act. They reduced the amount of programs and streamlined it into a small number of programs. And then IJO, we re-expanded into a lot of different classifications and categories. Now, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, it's a new formula program, which means the state is going to have an annual pot of money. And so they are having to develop a plan that they have to submit to the feds by August to figure out how they're going to spend these funds, in what way. They have to identify corridors and those kind of things. Not only is there a formula program, but there is also later going to be a discretionary program. So there are a number of new discretionary programs that have been formed, competitive grant programs that have been formed out of that infrastructure bill. So about 35% of the funds from the infrastructure bill are going into these competitive discretionary programs. Okay, so you all have seen recently that there was the call for the SS4A, the Safe Streets for All, right? So that program's out right now, due in September 15th or so. I know we're evaluating and looking at putting together a regional application. So if anybody is looking at the SS4A and hasn't talked to our office, please do about your ideas. Probably the best person to contact, Dustin or Caitlin, everybody, just go with anybody. But so Caitlin, and then, one of those other programs that has recently emerged that's out with some information is the railroad grade crossing program that is kind of similar to a federal version of local tracks. Obviously, oversimplification, but so long story short, please try to participate in NDOT's planning process for NEVI because we want to help them shape how they will spend on that National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure kind of funding program. So
Yeah, and I would add, if you're unable to attend tomorrow's in-person meeting, I think it starts at 3 p.m., there is an online recording of a previous webinar that explains the program. That would be helpful to watch that before you submit a survey entry. It's also helpful to understand that this funding is intended for ultra-fast charging along primarily interstates and US 31 that have been pre-designated by federal highway as alternative fuel corridors intended to support very fast charging for long distance travel. So we're not actually talking about the picture shown, which is level 2 charging for destinations. So if you put in comments about level 2 charging that's not actually relevant to this federal program.
This is much more to help facilitate interstate travel than it is, local regional travel per se. So, but please help take a look at that, just so that you're all familiar with that new program. So, and Zach's going to give us an update on the Connect Transit Plan.
Yeah, thanks. Connect Transit Plan, again, like we're always constantly trying to remind you of the work we do. This regional transit plan that we began last year. This is in cooperation with Transpo and the Urban Trolleys. We're looking at both systems in our urban area, talking about how transit can be improved and working better in the future. We had our first phase through fall earlier this year, where we reached out to the public and talked about some key choices that you need to make when you're talking about transit planning and trying to decide between walking further but waiting less, or walking less, waiting more, how frequent will those routes be, etc. We held a core design retreat, which many of the folks in this room, at least in the Art and South Bend region, participated in, where we really pushed the idea of what would reimagining our system if it'd be more ridership focused, where we're concentrating routes with frequency to high destinations, or coverage perspective, where we're reaching everybody with some service. And then we talked about if we could invest in what would that look like. And so we worked through these concepts. So now we're bringing those concepts out to the public. So our next phase to the public starts in June and extends into July. We're going to be asking the public, we're presenting those options, those concepts to the public, and says, which of these, or how much do you prefer this one versus this one? And really get an idea of where that fits. And so we'll be hitting up the first Fridays this week, getting that engagement. We'll be having public surveys online, and we go and pop up locations at bus stations or other community events throughout the next 2 months. And then we're having a our policy board meeting. Our consultant will be in town to do an update to our policy board, adopt those concepts and talk about this phase. So I encourage you to either come in person, that's at the county city building with the fourth floor and council chambers, or you can join online, which will be live streamed on YouTube as well. So we can get that information. And then the following day, on Thursday, on the 9th, we'll be having a stakeholder advisory committee meeting where we're asking again, some of these key stakeholders come in and really give us some deep dive information on that process or on those concepts. And then from there, in July, we'll be having public meetings. So we're all through June, we're kind of promoting and getting this ready. Get people out for public meetings. There'll be one in each of our major cities, the area, South Bend, Mishawaka, Elkhart, Goshen, as well as virtual options and everything. So really, goal is to get the message out and people engaged on that. So if you have any questions about the process, about the concepts, feel free to reach out to me at any time. Help us to share the message. So if you see us promoting things on Facebook, for instance, or you see something in the news, please share it. Tell your friends, your family, everyone on your listserv. Anyone that can help us out, we would greatly appreciate getting that message out. It's a big part of this effort, is really getting the word out to people. So any questions on this so far? For sure.
Now, the last item I had that's not on the agenda, but just as an FYI, you'll note that we were trying to make sure that we had a good quorum in the room today, because we do have a virtual participation policy, and we've been advised just making sure that with public access counselors' rulings on advisory commissions and all of those things, that if we have that virtual participation policy, that this committee is in line with that virtual participation policy. So what that looks like is that we have to have a quorum in the room to make sure that we're able to handle business. If we have half plus one, we can allow for virtual voting. If we're virtual voting, the person must be seen and heard. But first and foremost, we always have to have quorum in the room to conduct business. So for us, quorum, I believe, is off the top of my head is 7. Ashley says yes, I got that right. So that's what we're always going to seek to achieve, is at least 7 in the room. I know that that's a different space than we've been in with fully virtual meetings for a while. So I appreciate everybody who was able to make it today. Moving forward, we are going to need to make sure that we do have at least a quorum in the room. So just an FYI, I know that's different, but that's just kind of where we're at. And making sure that the advisory committee is in alignment with our virtual participation policies. Just an FYI. That's all that we had today.
Sorry, I had one more.
Nope.
Oh, sorry. I did want to introduce, we do have 2 summer interns with us this year. They're in the back of the room. You just want to come up closer and introduce yourselves. We have Kate and Katie with us this year. So just take a moment to say hello, say where you're from. They will be with us this summer.
Yeah. I'm Kate. I'm from Grandview and I've been Grandview my whole life. In the fall, I'm going to be a junior at IU Bloomington, sitting in Grandview. I'm Katie. I'm originally from Ohio. I graduated from Goshen College and I'm currently a graduate student getting a master's in community development.
Great, welcome to both of you. I'd like to thank MACOG for all of that information. Lot to process, I think, for all of it. We'll move on to privilege of the floor. If not, Zach, do we have any public comments?
We don't. I'm double checking. Okay. Real quick, but I don't have any. But I'm over now.
Correct. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Right, Glisman, so move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, have a great day.